think a lot of people join fitness programs and join coaches and kind of don't feel like there's an actual structure, an actual plan for them to follow. But I want you to know that kind of everyone is, on the same path, or at least a similar journey, which means that we can tick these goals off as you're moving forwards. Perfect. So what I wanted to speak about then is kind of like the main goal of all of these phases. So I'll touch on the individual phases in a minute, but for now, I just want to kind of go through what the actual objective is of the entire coaching program. So the first thing is, it's not about having a coach forever. I don't think that any coach should try and bring clients on for an indefinite period of time. There definitely has to be an element of teaching clients how to be autonomous. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd love you all to stick around forever, and I'll try and pack as much value into the program that makes you feel like you want to stay. But at the same time, I definitely try and encourage people to figure things out on their own and become autonomous at some point. The next thing is, I never want you to be more than 12 weeks away from your dream physique. So while we're not always going to be in a dieting phase, because I don't think that's productive for anyone, I think that when we transition into more flexibility and teaching you how to be, more flexible with nutrition, a little bit less strict on yourself, we still want to make sure that we're keeping on top of things enough that if you ever have a social event, so say, a wedding, or you have a photo shoot that you want to do, then you're never going to be more than kind of 8 to 12 weeks away from that kind of lean condition, which basically means that you're going to be in better shape than 90% of people the entire year round. And kind of in the same stance as that, I would like you to look like a cover model and move like an athlete. So essentially, we want you to be the fittest in the gym as well as the best looking in there. We want to improve your overall quality of life. So everything that you're doing inside and outside of the gym, we want that to be, to the best of your ability. I want you to kind of feel like you're able to do everything, enjoy the adventures that life's going to offer you. And we also want you to do that, without guilt. So throughout the first stages of your transformation, things are going to be relatively structured. They're going to be relatively strict, because that is a very important phase. We want you to get quick wins under your belt. We want you to build good momentum. But after that, we want to kind of teach you that 80-20 principle. So if you do something, potentially you've got a holiday, I definitely don't want you tracking on holidays. I want you to be able to enjoy social events and without kind of feeling guilty about that. So that's where we kind of implement that flexibility. We implement that 80-20 rule. So if you ever do have, setbacks, or you have things that you need to navigate, we're always ready to kind of bounce through them. Then the last thing, and this will be a massive part of these phases, is by improving your metabolism. So a lot of people will come to me when they first start and they're eating super low calories, but the weight's not changing, their physique's not changing shape. And a big part of that is, metabolism being not in a good place. And that's not necessarily like a genetic thing. It's not, it's not something that we can't change, because we can. A big part of that is going to be your movement throughout the day. It's going to be the amount of calories that you're on. So the idea between all of these phases is to eventually get you to a point where you're eating better than ever and you're also looking better than ever. So here are the 4 phases then. Oh, my rapid refuel's gone. Where's my jerry can? No problems. So the first phase is your ignition phase. So I'm going to break these down and make these real simple. So the ignition phase is just a priming phase. So when someone comes onto the program, I want to just make sure that they have all of the habits in place first, to ensure that they can, then go on to do the harder stuff later. So it's basically building the foundation before we start building the house. The fast lane fat loss phase, super simple, obviously, is your fat loss phase, or your cutting phase, your transformation phase, whatever you want to call it. That's where that's your first lap of your transformation, where we're going to lose a good amount of body weight very quickly in order to allow you to see those quick wins and stay motivated throughout the process. Now, your rapid refuel is, arguably the most boring phase, but it's also a very short phase as well. But that's where we're going to go into a reverse diet, which means kind of building up your calories slowly. And that's where, again, that refuel means, repairing that metabolism slowly, so we can get to a point where you're eating more food, but you're still just as lean as you were at the end of the dieting phase. Then the last phase is the full throttle phase, which is definitely the most exciting and the most interesting phase. For me personally anyway, this is where I get to really challenge you, really push you. So this would be like your gaining phase, your muscle building phase, or just your overall improvement phase, basically. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples now of people who have been through all of the phases and potentially been through all of the phases multiple times as well. So this is Adam. This was him when he first started. So this was before he'd worked with me at all. This in the middle was the end of his first dieting phase. So this was when he got to the end of his fast lane fat loss phase. We then took him through the reverse diet, so the rapid refuel. We then took him through a full throttle phase, and then eventually went back into another dieting phase, and this was the end result. So a lot of people, when they come on, I say to them, you'll only ever need to diet twice. You have the first diet to reach that kind of first lap of your transformation, and the second diet is normally where you get that, oh, wow, that's a jaw-dropping result kind of thing. Now, the second person may or may not be on this call, but he's been through multiple phases in this program. This was obviously very close to when he first started with me. This was the end of his first dieting phase. And then again, we did the same thing. We pushed him into a full throttle phase. We then dieted back down, and this was the results of his most recent fat loss phase. Impressive, Dan. Well done. Cool. So now I'm just going to break down these phases really simply.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome, mate. Going to break down these phases nice and simply into basically how long, what's the purpose of the phase, and what's expected of you, what's the result going to be, and are we going to repeat this phase at any point? So the first is the ignition phase. Excuse me, bear with. The first phase, the ignition phase. This will be your first 2 to 4 weeks on the program. Most probably, it never really lasts more than that because we do want to start, moving you into that fast lane fat loss phase. But the idea is just, again, to prepare yourself, build up some good routines, some good habits, and allow you to set those foundations for long-term success. Now, what's expected of you? Essentially, in the first 4 weeks, it's about working through checkpoint challenges. So these are going to be on your Notion, and these are things that you will need to complete 100% before we transition you into the next phase. So these are things like getting quick wins under your belt. So I wrote down some examples, which are consume 2 homemade meals per day, add 3,000 steps to your start point, and create and stick to an evening routine. So the result of that is most people will kind of maintain their body weight, or even more typically will drop a little bit on the scales over the first 2 to 4 weeks, but it's not necessarily the ultimate aim of this phase. So you may see a decent amount of progress quickly, but at the same time, it's about becoming more mentally resilient. So when we do, really start the hard work, really start crafting this physique, you've kind of got everything in place that you need to, and it's going to feel way more easier than if we just started you in a really harsh diet phase to begin with. This phase is not normally repeated with anyone because it's just that first 2 to 4 weeks. However, I have been known to repeat it with certain people, potentially after they've been on like a long holiday, maybe a 2-3 week holiday. If they've rejoined the program after a period of time, you may need to go through the ignition phase a couple of times. But this is probably the only part of the program where you may see potential to build muscle and lose fat at the same time, because you're eating around your maintenance calories, you're implementing better habits, and that's going to allow you to kind of get that ultimate building muscle and losing fat result. That's not going to last too long though. So that's when we will take you into the fast lane fat loss phase. So like I said, this is the first lap of your transformation. There's not necessarily a set amount of time you will be in this for. We will sit down and we will work out together how much weight you feel like you need to lose, like what your goals are, what your starting point is, and also if there's a set time frame that you want to work towards. So the actual weight goal is not the be all and end all, but it does give us a good idea of how long we're going to be in this phase for. We typically look to drop around 1% of your body weight per week, so we'll work it out from there. The overall goal would be to drop 10% body fat at a decent rate. So like I said, 1% a week, and that's plenty for, it's a healthy rate of loss, but you're going to be seeing progress at a decent rate. You're going to be seeing changes in the mirror very, very regularly, and that's going to keep you motivated to hit your overall goal. When you're in this phase, essentially, we're just going to continue with the habits and things that we implemented in the ignition phase. Obviously, want you to check in with me regularly, communicate with your coach. It's always your job to try and follow the plan that I give you as best as possible. I will take care of all the nitty gritty, and it's just about your job to kind of follow that as best as possible. And if it becomes to a point where you're struggling to stick to that, then just communicate with me, and then we can kind of sit down and make the necessary changes. And as long as you do that, then the success is absolutely guaranteed. So you're going to be leaner, fitter, healthier, and happier with what you see in the mirror. Now, this phase can be repeated pretty much as many times as you like. However, it's not massively wise to spend, months or years in a dieting phase. That's definitely not the point of fitness. The point of fitness is not to be losing weight. The point of fitness is to be improving, and to be improving, you don't want to be in a calorie deficit for a long period of time, because not only is that, not productive, it's not going to be great for your metabolism, and it's not going to be great for, enjoying life in general. So then the rapid refuel, like I mentioned, some people find this phase very boring, but it's almost one of the most important phases that we'll do together. So normally this will last around 4 to 6 weeks, because essentially we're looking to find your calorie maintenance. So basically the amount of calories that you can sit at and not see your weight come up and not see your weight come down. So the way I'll tend to do this is at the end of your dieting phase, I will give you a big boost of calories. So, maybe 400, 500 boost of calories, and that will allow you to have way more energy, way more flexibility in terms of your nutrition. And then from there, we'll just gradually increase until we find a point where your weight will spike more than 0.5 kilos over a 2-week period. So essentially we'll find that maintenance, and that's when we can get out of the rapid refuel phase. So, like I said, the purpose is to repair your metabolism, get you used to eating more calories, and essentially just give you more energy and maintain your body weight. Because I essentially want you to get to a point where you're eating way more calories, but you're actually kind of looking better than you were in your dieting phase. So you're still just as lean, but your muscles are a bit more fuller, you're more energetic, you're performing better in day-to-day life, and that's what we're going to do. So the idea behind this is you're going to follow your meal planner, you're going to track your calories closely and trust the process. So even if you find it relatively boring for 4 weeks, you've just got to remember it's a 4-week period, and from there, we can then really crack on with the fun stuff. So the result is that your body weight is going to remain the same, your body composition should improve, and by the end of this phase, you should be looking your best while eating more calories than ever. This phase will be repeated after every long-term dieting phase. So pretty much every fast lane fat loss phase, there may be times in the process where you take shorter dieting periods, maybe like 4 weeks, just to either regain your appetite or to just lose a little bit of body fat quickly. We probably wouldn't do a rapid refuel after that. There's not really a massive need to, because your metabolism won't slow down that much in that period of time. But anytime that we're doing a long-term diet, so probably, anything from like 10 to 12 weeks upwards, we would do, a little rapid refuel afterwards. And like I said, the actual time frame we'll do this for depends on how quickly we can find your maintenance calories. Okay, so the last phase, these aren't always linear necessarily, but, typically the last phase will be your full throttle. So how long is this going to last? As long as possible. I definitely want people to be spending the majority of time in this phase. So after your transformation, we're going to try and make the most, and get the most out of this full throttle phase, because this is where we're going to have the most fun with it. We're going to be able to push you the most, and you're definitely going to make the most progress in this phase. So this allows us to focus on improving our overall fitness levels. So namely strength, hypertrophy, so muscle building, power, but also things like speed, endurance, balance, and things like that as well. In this phase, I do tend to put a little bit more of a focus on your actual macronutrient intake. So we'll talk a lot about calories. We'll talk a lot about protein in the other phases. But in this phase, I think that, your protein targets are really important. Your carbohydrate target is going to be really important, especially around training. And your fat intake will be very, very useful as well, to make sure that you're able to hit the calories that are set for you. We'll also set you some performance targets, so based around what your goals are. So typically these will be, strength targets to hit, but if you have slightly different goals, then we can set different performance targets for you as well to work towards. The result of all this is improved muscle mass, improved fitness levels. And if we can build you up to a point where you've got more muscle mass, it's going to allow you to improve your physique, but also make dieting easier in the long run. So this is where, again, we're talking about improving your metabolism, because the more muscle mass that you can hold on your body, you'll find the next dieting phase much easier, because you'll be burning more calories at rest. So when someone joins me at the start of the program and they're eating super low calories, and they're not losing the body fat, one massive reason behind that is because they might not be holding enough muscle, and that is meaning they're not burning a lot of calories throughout the day. So we can get you to the point where, for females, where we're burning 2,500 calories a day, for men, if we're burning 3,000 calories a day, it's going to make that next dieting phase so much easier, and you're going to feel an absolute breeze. So like I mentioned, this phase will last as long as possible, depending on, what social events you have coming up, depending on your lifestyle. But essentially, we are looking to spend as much time as possible in this phase.